Yo, Broncos country, what's going on? A&J here, and we're back with some Broncos talk. I know I hadn't been around the last few days. I'd been preoccupied with a bunch of whatever. We'll just leave it at that for putting it as simple as I can. But of course, got a lot to talk about here. Of course, as we saw over the weekend, the Buffalo Bills went into Jacksonville and defeated the Jaguars in one of the more competitive contests, and there were an awful lot of those over the weekend, with the exception of last night's game of the Texans and Steelers. Of course, you should see the breaking news video that I had out for that, but that's neither here nor there. Interestingly enough, we got the Bills coming into town this weekend, Saturday to be more specific, and of course we will be going live Saturday at about 2:15 at the latest, so look forward to that. But we're going to just jump right into things and just talk a little bit about the injury situation with the Bills, specifically Dalton Kincaid, Jordan Poyer, and Gabe Davis. Now, the latter two here are actually listed as out. And of course, I can't believe I was going to mistake him for the other tight end. Dalton Kincaid has been seen in what is known as a precautionary walking boot. So his status for this Saturday is going to be up in the air, but there's a chance he's going to try to play. That's going to be really, really important. I'll go into that in a moment, but I just want to talk about the other two here in Davis and Poyer. Obviously, with Poyer, it's really going to hurt the Bills because they actually have one of the worst run defenses. Not that Poyer has anything to do with that, but obviously having his presence there would certainly help with a lot of the things that the Buffalo Bills do well defensively. And I'm sure he's going to be sorely missed in that secondary. Of course, there are quite a few other names that are currently actually listed as either questionable or potentially out altogether, namely Ty Johnson, the running back that was very instrumental in the Bills' win against the Broncos last year in the wild card round. And then, of course, there's Maxwell Hairston, rookie cornerback, that I feel like has actually played pretty well when he's available. They could really use his help if he's good to go. And of course, Terrell Bernard, inside linebacker, who again would actually be really important to help with defending the run game because, as we all know in Broncos country, that's certainly something that has been a bit challenging for us. We'll talk about that in a moment. But another challenging aspect of it that may not actually be there is the fact that Dalton Kincaid, you know, as a tight end, the Broncos have struggled going against tight ends, even at full strength. I mean, think back to, I believe it was week 5 or 6. Either way, that game against the Giants, where really the Giants were lighting the Broncos up for about really 3.5 quarters, and of course the Broncos ended up coming through with a comeback win in that one. But to think that if Kincaid's available, along with having Dawson Knox, and they also got a really good rookie in Jackson Hayes, I feel like that's something that the Broncos are going to have to be a little bit better prepared for. I'll talk about here as we move along. But to me, these are all three notable names for the Bills that I feel as if are going to be highly missed if Kincaid's not available. Obviously, I mentioned before Davis and Poyer are out, but if Kincaid is out, that's gotta scream advantage Broncos at that point because that's one less tight end that we have to worry about. So I don't know. We'll see how all of that goes. Maybe he suits up, maybe he doesn't. But that's the injury situation with the Bills. Now with the Broncos, on the other hand, you got Luke Wattenberg, Brandon Jones, Drew Sanders, and of course J.K. Dobbins, all of which have missed significant amount of time for the Broncos this season, more particularly the later part of the season. And of course, in the case of Drew Sanders here, he's yet to really see the field in the 2025. Now we're in the 2026 side of things. But if he were actually to be available for this game, especially because he's actually been set with the 21 day practice window. So if he could make himself available, that would be huge, especially for the run game, maybe even in helping with covering the tight ends. I know that if we could get Brandon Jones back here, that would be great. Not real sure if that's going to be the case, but of course, he is eligible to come off of IR if the Broncos choose to do so. Same is the case for obviously Luke Wattenberg and of course J.K. Dobbins here. And really, that's kind of where there's a slight dilemma if we're being perfectly honest. Obviously, again, Drew Sanders will be back provided that he's able to participate within the 21-day practice window. But the situation as it stands is that you can only activate 8 players off of the IR in a season, and the Broncos have already activated 6. Now, obviously, we got 3 dudes that are on the IR right now, and the question is, which ones do you bring back if all of them are ready? To me, as much as I love what we've gotten out of Luke, I feel like Alex Forsyth has definitely filled the void rather nicely. Probably a little bit of a drop-off, but not like the way it was last year, especially given that he was the one that gave up that blocked walk-away field goal in Kansas City. But he's actually come a long way since then, and interestingly enough, had a hell of a game out in Kansas City on Christmas. So maybe bringing back Wattenberg isn't as necessary at this point. Now, if there's an opportunity to bring back Brandon Jones here, I think that takes a little bit more priority, again, for the fact that there has been issue guarding the tight ends even when he was healthy. But more than anything else, you know they're activating JK. That's a no-brainer if there ever was one right there. JK is absolutely getting activated when he becomes available. And of course, Sean Payton has said multiple times in recent weeks he's close to coming back. There are even reports out there that say he could be available for the divisional matchup this weekend. Not saying that'll necessarily be the case. I kind of have been calling that, and it feels like I'm getting closer to being right. But the flip side to it, however, is that especially given the injuries that the Buffalo Bills are dealing with currently, you might actually be able to afford sitting him one more week. And I wouldn't be shocked if that's what Sean Payton and the Broncos coaching staff decide to do. Now, the flip side to that is, of course, you still have R.J. Harvey and Jaleel McLaughlin still doing a pretty good job in the run game. Now, my thing to that is, of course, Harvey's been getting a bulk of the carries, but the yardage production hasn't necessarily been what you would call stellar. So maybe you should kind of balance that out. Maybe see McLaughlin getting more of the carries, or make it to where they each get 10 to 12 carries, and whatever else you want to have as far as that's concerned can go either to Tyler Bidet, or we know Bo can use his legs, and we'll talk a little bit more about Bo here in a little bit. But to me, this is the situation as it stands where all of these guys are concerned. Again, as far as who I'd bring back on the IR, the 2 choices I make, the obvious one is JK. And to me, I think the priority has got to be Brandon Jones. But we'll see how all that works out. Hopefully Drew Sanders is ready to go as well. But we'll find that out in the coming days and perhaps the next week or so. But with that, we're going to get into the main topic of the video, and that's just going to be that main event matchup. Josh Allen versus Bo Nix. Now, again, the last time these two met, the Bills actually got the better of them. And, of course, wound up running away with it as the game went on. Needless to say, Bo actually struck first blood with a deep shot to Troy Franklin. And in all honesty, that actually gave me significant hope for Troy. Only he's still fighting his way to be overly consistent the way that we know he's capable of being. I mean, Pat Bryant has actually come in and looked better in a lot of cases. And, of course, he'll be available for this game. I gotta imagine he's going to be one of the more go-to guys for this, along with Cortland Sutton, Evan Ingram, amongst others. And honestly, we'll see how all that works out. But for me, this is just intriguing because, again, we mentioned the injury situation with the Buffalo Bills. Crazy thing about that is that Josh Allen here isn't doing too much better himself. I'm not going to go into the details of what he's dealing with, but at the very least, I know that there's a foot issue, and really and truly, he put on his Superman cape this past Sunday against the Jags. He'll need that and then some against the Broncos this weekend. I'm not really sure if that'll work out the same way, especially with the defense largely intact. And I got to imagine that Sean Payton is going to open up the playbook a bit more, especially for Bo Nix to really do his thing. And again, we need Bo to use his legs a little bit more than what he has. So I feel like that's going to be very imperative this coming Saturday. But really and truly, a lot of things right now, as I said before, are kind of leaning towards advantage Broncos on this. Now, it is the playoffs. Anything can and will happen. We'll see how it goes. But for now, that's pretty much all I got for you at this point. Let me know what y'all think down below. Are y'all as confident as I am going into the weekend? Or are there other things that we should be concerned about? Let me know down below. Of course, if you enjoy the content, like, share, and subscribe. And this has been your time with A&J, and I appreciate you spending it with me.